Coogs house. Yes, Houston's coming off a big win last weekend, heads to what might be a bigger one this upcoming weekend. But the injury bug seems to have bitten the Cougars, and Stephon Boogie Johnson's the latest victim.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us first listen each and every day here at Locked On Coogs. If you're enjoying the conversation and you don't know what to say, I'm tripping over my words a little bit, but tell us in the comments down below what sock you put on first. As Houston's going on a road trip this week to Arizona State. Got to start, putting your shoes on one after the other and get a move on for the Cougs. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Best place to get last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. But we got more on that fun later. I do want to talk some about Houston and the injury bug that has bitten them in the first segment. I also give my first looks and concerns in the second and third segments about Arizona State so far. Looking to get a guy or two on later this week to talk about it. Couple ripples in the effect as well as we're heading to Big 12 basketball media days in Kansas City in the middle of the week, which is exciting, but also, throwing hiccups and wrinkles and trying to get other people on and matching up schedules. But first, foremost, Houston is beaten up. Now, we still don't have an official whole lot of word out on exactly what is going on with Boogie Johnson. Stephon Boogie Johnson spent last Saturday against Arizona in a short walking boot. Short walking boot implies they're trying to do some sort of an immobilization in the lower part of the ankle, foot. Doesn't really inherently tell you if it's a ligaments thing or a bones thing or whatever. But it did sound like in press conference on Monday, Willie Fritz says that Boogie Johnson is going to seek a second opinion on that foot before hanging it up. On Sunday night, Boogie posted on Instagram that he was done for the season. He also posted some sort of the comeback will be great or something like that on Twitter on Monday. But Fritz acted like at least the staff was under the impression that Boogie was going to seek a second opinion. Now, folks that are out there at practice every day act like it wasn't a big surprise he missed the Arizona game. I do think there was kind of a general consensus shock on Sunday that he's going to miss the rest of the season. And so that second opinion may come back with something that leads to him playing more, maybe some of the latter parts. Maybe it's kind of thing where it's up in the air. And if Houston's having a really strong year, he does want to come back and push for something at the end. We'll see. And I also have said for a while now, I think he's a guy with a real pro career in the near future. And so maybe he doesn't want to put too much of that in jeopardy either. We'll see where all of that goes. I do think, though, that on its own, Stephon Boogie Johnson, while he was a pro caliber guy, is in a very talented and deep wide receiver room. Amari Thomas has blossomed before our own eyes. You also have Harvey Broussard. Kobe Young can take the top off. Makai Muse does everything you ask him to do and does it very well. I think there's a lot of places you can go with that wide receiver room in general. That being said, the bigger thing for me, if I'm looking at this as a Houston thing, is this is another guy that was going to make an impact this season or had made an impact this season that goes down with what could be, after the second opinion, a season ending injury. Rashawn Sanford tore his knee before the season started at the end of training camp. That was a gut punch. I don't know if he or Dean Connors would have started running back, but between the two of them, you're looking at 20 carries apiece. I mean, that maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but those guys were able to share the rock really, really impressively. Did not get that after the fact. You lost David Duquay in the Colorado game, your best tackle to date. Certainly the best tackle that Fritz has had, but your best tackle in the last couple of years, certainly since Patrick Paul left. And Duquay, another bad knee injury, and he's playing a game like it's a violent sport, right? Jay New York, you lost early in the season. Devin Williams, I don't guess we've heard is officially out for the season, but he's on like every injury report. Last week, you had Stacey Sneed and Luke McGarry both on the injury report, as well as listed as out. They both made impacts as rotational guys. And Houston, is in the midst of something special. 6-1, bowl bound, building towards a great season in Willie Fritz's second year, and Houston's third in the Big 12. But ultimately, it feels like we're kind of chipping away and getting some of these. Now, I will say that, like at offensive skill positions, one of the things that's been good for this team is that they have so much depth. That's just getting really tested right now, right? When Sanford went out as running back, you had Ray Sanford out. You also lost Fat Burnett for a minute, and Jermaine Burnett was out for a while. Dean Connors was there, but he also is a one man workhorse in this offense. It's very running back heavy. Stacey Sneed just went out. DJ Butler, further down the depth chart, he's getting to play some. Like you're seeing that rotation happen. I think that we're a little bit away from that happening at the wide receiver spot necessarily. However, you play more of them on the field at once, and so it's going to be something you feel the impact of more early, especially if McGarry is out at the second tight end. Because Tanner Koziel, as a starting tight end, can also play some of those receiver spots if you put McGarry in at the tight end spot. So you could theoretically cover some of that up, but ultimately losing Boogie is a big blow to the offense. And I would argue, while he has been, you could see him on the sideline on Saturday, like actively involved in the game planning and preparing process every opportunity thus far, even injured. His leadership in like the huddle on the field itself on a drive while it's happening is, I think, something that's important. He's a guy that's been there before in a lot of ways for this team. He has also had that Hail Mary game-winning catch against West Virginia and has had those moments in his career that a veteran leader can present to the young guys, and he can speak from a level of having been there, right? That not a whole lot of Cougs have. Part of the deal with pulling the guys in they've pulled in and pulling this roster together in year two of the rebuild like they've got means that you're sometimes lacking in that experience department. Boogie had that. That hurts, right? Um, I also, not to like compare injuries and misery because Houston's going through all of them. I also have had people say, like, yeah, but the biggest injury because of the importance of position thus far was actually in Dukwe. And that may be the case. I thought the offensive line won a slew of awards. Offense actually won a slew. Connor Wigman won offensive player of the week. Offensive line won offensive line of the week in the conference. Special teams player of the week seems to be just name it the Ethan Sanchez Award at this point, right? I do think that you were able to find ways to grow and develop guys behind Ndukwe. Just Ndukwe was starting at a higher spot as far as that trajectory goes, and so it's harder to figure out, I guess. All in all, though, this is a lot of guys. The depth chart deal that they post out, not the depth chart, but the injury report they post out through the Big 12 this year. Houston has seemingly always had a lot of out guys, and I think that's because it's a very honest program. They're not going to lie to you, beat around the bush with it. But you look at it on your computer screen, and like those names are starting to become more and more names that you knew from making plays, and that in and of itself is a problem. Now, keep Connor Wigman upright, knock knock, knock on some wood for that one. You make sure you got some weapons for him to get the ball to because you have a lot of those. I think that they can still win ball games. I don't mean that this is super super dire, but it is starting to add up in a way that we need to be honest with ourselves as fans as we establish what's Houston going to do. And so I'm hoping, crossing fingers, that the second opinion comes out. The Boogie can come back sometime in November or something like that. However, I feel like in his gut, he felt like it was a bad diagnosis last night on Sunday night, right? That was his read. Now, speaking of diagnoses. Speaking of looking at things and making educated guesses on them, I also looked at some Arizona State stuff and kind of starting to get my feet wet in what they do. And I'm going to look at what they do in just 1 second. Before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Monarch Money, because let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts and let alone tell you what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch's all-in-one personal finance tool. Brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface, on your laptop or your phone. Again, I teach, I coach, I podcast. My wife's got forms of income. It all goes to one place. You can kind of easily map out and track out where things are going and where things are coming from, all in one simple place. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarch.com for 50% off your purchase. Monarch.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first full year. Today's show is also brought to you by everybody over at FanDuel because football season is here. FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Feels like someone should tell the Texans the football season came back. Took a lot of time off, and they might not know that we're back in football season for the Texans. But whether you're waking up and getting in on the action that like the Texans are not, right now, new customers can bet just $5, get $300 back in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5. And if it hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now, the line has moved some. Houston went from an 8.5-point dog to a 7.5-point dog. And so things are maybe slightly moving in Houston's direction as we get towards the weekend. But wherever you think about the action, you get on a pregame, postgame, I guess pregame, during game, post kickoff, prop bets, money lines, anything you want, FanDuel's got it. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs here. And look, I looked at Arizona State some, and I'm not going to say like I've studied every single one of their plays or trying to figure out how they want to open up certain things or whatever. But it's admittedly a team that Houston hasn't played in a minute, and it's been a while. And I wanted to look at if not not that I don't watch them play other games, obviously, but I did want to look at like what it looked like this year. And I mostly say that because I want to look what they look like this year because I assume they look a lot different than last year, right? Last year, won the Big 12. Cam Scatabo was like a guy that everyone in America fell in love with because he was just an exciting football player and all of that. However, I also pointed out last year was just a hard to replicate kind of year for them. They had a streak of winning a bunch of one-score games. They beat Mississippi State, Texas State, Kansas, Utah, Central Florida, and BYU, all by 8 points or less, or a single score, I should say, last season. This year, two of their two or both of their losses are to three of the teams that they had those one-loss teams to, or the one-score wins against last season. So, in a better way to put that, to avenge last season and those one-score Arizona State wins, a couple of teams, namely Mississippi State and Utah, have come back and really shown it to Mississippi, shown it to Arizona State. Now, I should also point out that they lost to Cincinnati last year by 10 points. They were missing their starting quarterback, Sam Levin, that one. But that is a game that happened to them. I don't want to act like it didn't happen last year as well. This year, you saw Arizona State like go back and forth with the TCU team, and bluntly, TCU fumbled the game away, like literally fumbled the game away in the final few minutes to ultimately give up a field goal. Final couple minutes to ultimately give up a field goal. I do think that a big difference here is that in those one-score games, they did lose that best player. We will talk about Jordyn Tyson. I think he's a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. I'm not trying to like sell him short, but as far as college football players go, it's hard to replicate what Cam Scatabo was able to bring to that football team a year ago. 2,300 scrimmage yards, 25 total touchdowns. Yes, one of them was thrown. Also, just an emotional leader on the team, though, from a lot of regards, right? He got guys going a lot. You also, as far as looking at what Arizona State brings this year against Houston specifically, Houston gets them coming off of a big emotional win. Tech beat Arizona State a year ago and frankly kind of put things in kind of like we have to win out to win this conference kind of mode in a lot of ways for Arizona State. Arizona State obviously went on and did that. This year, Arizona State was able to avenge that, and they kind of also are in a moment where they have to win out and do all that because they've already got a conference loss and I would argue, bad non-conference loss, right? And so they look at the path to get back to conference title games, college football playoff, and all that. They kind of need to win out. They did that in an emotional way on Saturday. Dillingham, head coach Kenny Dillingham, who I think the world of, got like emotional in the press conference on the field and just ran away, right? You got Jordyn Tyson and Sam Leavitt both playing hurt, I think. Jordyn Tyson was grabbing his hamstring on Saturday against Texas Tech. Sam Leavitt missed their second to most recent game and was not quite as mobile against Tech as I thought he was in previous things that's on YouTube. Um, Look, I I say all to say that Houston's weirdly catching them at a prime time for them to have a letdown, right? And I don't mean that like facetious, like, oh, it's going to take a letdown for Houston to win this game. I mean, it would just obviously help, and I think it's very natural for them to feel that way, right? If you look at them, the emotional week, they're back in the hunt, they're back in the AP poll, all of that coming off the Tech win, right? You also had guys play banged up and hurt to strive to get that Tech win, that hard fought win over Texas Tech just last week. Um, and frankly, it was a series of late game heroics and all of that. And all of those things add up to me to mean that this week is the week to get them, right? If you're Houston. I also think that it's worth pointing out that I think a lot of people on the Houston side of things see, okay, Tech was a really good football team when we played them, and they just got beat. That means this Arizona State team is better than the team that really put a beating on Houston. And I don't think transitive property works in every case. Obviously, I joke about that. Some people don't get the joke on Twitter, but I point out that transitive property kind of say whatever you want it to say in college football. It's kind of the cool things about college football, actually, is it can say whatever you want it to say. But Texas Tech against Arizona State did not have starting quarterback Brandon Morton, was down a pass rusher and really struggled at a couple things that it did not feel like mechanics of football kind of things. Didn't feel like they struggled with against Houston, right? They just weren't quite as smooth. And if that's the pass rusher, if that's the quarterback being different, whatever, it's the reality of the cards they were dealt that week. Houston didn't have to deal with those cards or didn't have to have Tech dealing with those cards, right? I also look at this as I think the game plan is going to be different. And if Houston is in a one score game for a majority of this game, I'd imagine they have 40 or more rushes. I can't believe Texas Tech didn't, if I'm being really honest with you. I honestly watched the game on 2x speed without the announcers on it. So maybe they said some reason why that I missed. That'll, I'm sure, come up in the notes throughout the week as I'm gaining more information on the game. But I was surprised to see Arizona State not have to combat a snowballing effect of Texas Tech running the football behind those big hog mollies. Right now, I thought that was really going to be in part because Will Hammond is a talented runner, and without Baron Morton, they might lean on that even more. And maybe there's some nuance to how Arizona State stacked boxes and whatever to keep them from running the football. And I should point out, Texas Tech was down 19-7, while it only became a 26-22 football game. Texas Tech was down 19-7 in the fourth quarter. So in the fourth, they're throwing the football a lot, try and get more possessions before the game's over, right? Different. I'm talking about quarters 1 through 3. I think they should have had that Dickey kid should have had 30 carries, right? Will Hammond should have had 15 carries just in the first 3 quarters, and intentional carries at that. I think if Houston is in a game that is 10 points or less in the fourth quarter, what you'll see here as they try and, ultimately they may go to 2-minute drill, try and score those 10 points. But to that point, if they're keeping it that single digits kind of close, I bet Houston is running the ball 2 out of every 3 downs. And I think that's in part because one of your goals as an offense is going to be to keep that Arizona State offense off the field, right? Because the Arizona State offense is good. And so good, I want to talk about my top concern on them in the third and final segment. I guess that's the best. Let's go ahead and jump on into it. But before we get to that, I do want to remind you guys today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time Against College Football. Back. Couldn't be more excited to get to tailgates and rivalries and all the energy in the stands. There's not much like it, but if you want to be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I and Locked On, we all use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You can pull up the Game Time app, check in on when, if you're going to Arizona State game, I actually think this is a fairly reasonable game to get to. But check in on the action if you want to get to Houston Cougar basketball coming up. Lehigh, that's only a couple weeks away at this point. Like whatever you want to go see, you can get in on the action with Game Time. So take the we're going to buy college football tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's promo code Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Park Rangers Locked On Coogs here. And so I was going back and forth what to do with this because I want to say what my biggest first concern was for Houston in watching Arizona State, right? And I don't say to say that Arizona State's unbeatable. They lost twice this year. They lost twice in the regular season last year, right? This is not some Goliath of a program. They're good. I'm not going to lie to you. They're good. I think I fall, though, on my biggest concern with them being matching up with wide receiver Jordyn Tyson. I mentioned in the last segments, I think the guy is truly a top 5 pick in the 2026 NFL draft, kind of good. And I understand that a receiver has a lot different impact than a pass rusher or a quarterback would have. But he's a guy you just have to be correct with at all times. He's big, strong, fast, special route runner, tracks the ball over his head well, great hands. He has phenomenal basketball player like elevation on jump balls. And I don't mean to say there's no chance Houston can cover him. And I know waxing poetically about another team's guy kind of gives that instance up. He's a college football player. He puts on his cleats. Everyone does, right? I just mean that he's really good. And for my money, he's the best receiver Houston will see this year. And he, again, I think he's the best receiver in the country. And that's okay. He's going to figure out a way to cover him. Houston's troubles tackling the last couple weeks have me concerned, right, about how they tackle him as well. But admittedly, a lot of his damage is done before he catches the football, and so maybe it's almost a moot point. And we'll see on Saturday, I guess. But he does so much damage before he catches the football. I think you're going to see Latrell McCutcheon tracking him side to side. If they weren't going to be a gambler on that. I imagine you also get help from Jordan Allen or Kentrell Webb at the safety position, shaded over, and you get some sort of high-low bracket when things go deep to that side. Both Webb and McCutcheon have pretty good size to deal with some of the jump balls and elevation. McCutcheon has long arms, too, to get in on pass breakups. The bigger challenge for me will be that lately it feels like Houston's gotten into – I hadn't put a finger on the situations yet, but going to these cover zero or single high blitzes to kind of get the ball out fast. And that puts your DBs on an island. And Leavitt's going to make a guy miss sometimes. That island might not be. And again, it's not because he can't be tackled, he can't be stopped. Teams have done it. And he did injure his hamstring, it looked like at one point in the Tech game, played with it, finished the game, but you wonder how much more sore that is on Sunday and Monday and so on, right? And how much did he practice this week or whatever with that. I also, in my notes here, I've honestly, if they can limit Jordyn Tyson to 1 or 2 explosive plays, that might be a win because it feels like he's having 4 and 5 and 6 a game at times. Right now, he didn't have 4 and 5 and 6 against Tech, but I would point out that Arizona State did gain 394 yards against Tech. They only scored 26 points, but 394 yards against Tech and that defense. Now, I can hear my own father tell me, Parker, you pick the receiver, not the quarterback, and the quarterback has to get the receiver the ball. And it's not I don't think I'm concerned about Sam Leavitt, and I really thought long and hard about putting him as my first or primary or biggest concern. I think Sam Leavitt's also a pro. I don't think he's quite the same caliber of pro that Jordyn Tyson is, but some of that's positional difference, right? Sam Leavitt is the kind of guy that I think the best defense for Houston will be their own running offense. Keeping Sam Leavitt off the field will be important. I do think Sam Leavitt is better than Fafita, but I don't – look, I think Houston will play him similarly in that they just don't want him on the field, right? I don't think that Sam Levitt goes 24 of 26 through the air, but I do think that much like Noah Fafita, he's really, really good at the off schedule, off platform, moving around behind the line of scrimmage and finding something, going to scramble drill rules, all those kinds of things when he can improvise. And I think Sam Levitt's really at his best. And Houston contained for periods of the game Noah Fafita in that way. It was not, in my opinion, strong enough to just say, we'll do the exact same thing against Arizona State. They got to be better at those things against Arizona State. And frankly, they were better with them against Arizona. I thought they were going to be. And so maybe, the continued growth is important there. Sam Levitt does spread the ball around some. I say take the other grain of salt, though, because it's not quite Jordyn Tyson's down there somewhere, kind of chuck it up. But he knows the athlete he's got. He can throw a jump ball and be very confident for a good reason that Jordyn Tyson's going to come down with it, right? So he makes some kind of throw to guys that aren't open throws because of that. And so we'll see where that goes. Now, admittedly, I've named two offensive guys. So on the defense side, I think when Houston's offense has had problems, it's because of a good defensive line. Their best defensive lineman or edge rusher really is Prince Durbin, 6'2", 245, edge guy. I think both tech edge guys that Houston saw a lot of were better. But I do think this is the best defensive line group you've seen since that Tech game. So it's a good measuring stick for how much better have we gotten since that. I think they're a much better pass rushing defensive line than run playing defensive line. That's just my initial read on watching, like I said, a couple games on YouTube at double speed with no commentary because that would drive me a little crazy. But I do think that's where they're at on that, right? So I think that actually Houston leaning into running the football, if they can keep the game close, and ultimately hope that running the football snowballs into bigger things like it did against Arizona, right? To some degree. I think that's when you'll see maybe some negating of that good pass rush, those good pass rushers Arizona State has. So I think that those are where Houston's going to keep their focus on. I think, yes, the quarterback, yes, the defensive end. I think those guys are both impactful players, but you got to have two guys where Jordyn Tyson is at all times. And I think, frankly, coming off of a little bit of a hamstring and a tech game and whatever, you're going to look at this as a chance to really take advantage of some things falling in your lap. And man, I understand that Dillingham is a great coach and that Sam Levitt hasn't lost a whole lot at home, although at point he almost did to TCU and he almost did to Tech. And Houston's also from the great state of Texas, and there may be something there. I feel like it's the kind of game where, much like the Tech game, you have a test coming. Now, on Winspeedy here, Houston and Arizona State have played a total of 9 times, right? The last time they played was in 1990, and it was in Tokyo. I don't have the same vitriolic hatred or whatever that I would have had for Tech, and the same kind of trash talking level throughout the week might not quite be there. Frankly, I've only met a handful of people with Arizona State degrees or some connection. They've been lovely. But I do think much like that week, it's a kind of game where Houston's going to have to play well. I don't think it's the kind of game where they play out of their minds and have a bunch of things sent down from the heavens that go well. I don't think it's that kind of a game. I know there's one of those kind of games on Houston's schedule, but I do think it's the kind of game where Houston's got to be on it, on their A game from the jump, ready to roll off the first snap, not throwing a backwards pass that turns into a fumble. Now, we'll be breaking this game down more this week. As I mentioned, we're also going to Big 12 basketball media days in the middle of the week at in Kansas City. A quick day trip up there. So we're going to talk to some folks and get some stuff going there too. So hit subscribe to the content to make sure you're getting the latest in the Houston Cougars each and every day. Locked On Cougars, a prime member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs. I want to come back in after the fact here to say I usually just recommend Locked On Big 12 for a second listen, and I would rarely recommend them on a second listen most of the days, right? Drake Toll put out a special third segment that he also cut out to be its own separate segment, talking about some help that the Toll family could use. Obviously, with a bunch of hospitals and things like that in the greater Houston area, you may have a connection or something. They're not asking for money or asking for anything like that. They are legitimately looking for like just medical help and like some game planning of sorts. If you know of anything like that, check over Locked On Big 12 or check on Drake Tolan Locked On Big 12 on Twitter, and they're talking about it as well. Pans and Pandas disease. If you got anything on that, check out with that. Make sure to go check them out as well. Locked On Coogs and Locked On Big 12, both proud members of Locked On Podcast Network. Means your team every day. Go Coogs.